He thought it was just another quiet morning in his neighborhood, until a car pulled up and strangers dressed like police officers stepped out. They weren't real cops, but they carried the weight of intimidation, demanding answers, threatening arrest, and accusing him of something he didn't do, all because of so-called unpaid HOA fees. In that moment, the ordinary became terrifying. But what they didn't realize was that this man was far from ordinary. He carried training, discipline, and a truth they could never have imagined. How far would they go? And how far would he let it go before everything changed? He lived a disciplined life, built on structure and routine. Early mornings at the gym, quiet evenings spent maintaining his home, and weekends catching up with family. To his neighbors, he was just another face in the community. A man who paid his bills, kept his yard neat, and minded his own business. What most didn't know was that behind his calm demeanor was years of service, training, and sacrifice as a member of the Special Forces. But here, in this quiet neighborhood, none of that mattered. He wasn't seen for his service or his strength. He was seen only through the narrow lens of prejudice. On the surface, it was just another day. The sun hung low, washing the streets in gold. He had just returned from errands, carrying groceries into his home, the kind of ordinary moment most people wouldn't think twice about. But in communities like his, even the most ordinary moments could shift without warning. Down the block, a car slowed. Its passengers weren't neighbors, and they weren't there by chance. They wore uniforms that looked official, badges that gleamed just enough to demand attention, and expressions sharp with authority. They had chosen him, and as they parked at the edge of the cul-de-sac, the quiet balance of his life was about to be shattered. He didn't know it yet, but within minutes, his loyalty, his identity, and his very right to exist peacefully in his own neighborhood would be challenged. The tension mounted as they tried to pull him toward their car. His groceries lay scattered on the driveway, a silent reminder of how suddenly normal life could be torn apart. Neighbors whispered, some shaking their heads, but still no one acted. The weight of their silence was almost as heavy as the grip on his arm. In that instant, he knew he had to make a choice. Submit and let the injustice play out, or draw on the strength and training that had carried him through battles far harsher than this. The men didn't know who they were dealing with. They didn't know the storm they had just awakened. The car door slammed shut, and the quiet cul-de-sac seemed to echo with the sound. Two men stepped out, their uniforms crisp, their badges gleaming in the late sunlight. At first glance, they looked official enough to fool anyone passing by. But something about the way they carried themselves felt off, less like protectors of the law and more like predators searching for a target. He noticed them immediately, but he didn't flinch. Years of training had taught him to stay calm, to observe before reacting. Still, his gut tightened. They were here for him. "Sir, we need to talk to you about your unpaid HOA fees," one of them said, their voice sharp, more accusation than inquiry. The words hit him like a slap. Unpaid fees? He knew that wasn't true. He had the receipts, the records, every detail in order. But that didn't matter. The tone in their voice wasn't about rules or fairness. It was about control. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, their eyes wide but their hands idle. No one stepped forward. No one asked if this was right. He stood alone, under the weight of stares that judged before they understood. The men closed the distance, their presence heavy and suffocating. One reached for his arm as if to restrain him. His muscles tensed instinctively. Every part of his training told him he could break free, disarm, and end this in seconds. But another voice inside reminded him he wasn't on a battlefield anymore. This was his home. This was supposed to be safe. Failure to comply will result in arrest. The other barked, flashing paperwork that looked more like a crude forgery than any legal document. His pulse quickened, not from fear for himself but from the chilling realization of what this really was. A performance. These men weren't here for justice. They were here to humiliate, to intimidate, to remind him that no matter his discipline, his service, or his sacrifice, in their eyes he was still less. The grip on his arm tightened, rough and deliberate, as if they wanted to make a spectacle of him. His heart hammered, not from fear, but from the rage that burned beneath his calm exterior. The fake officers pushed harder, trying to force him toward their car. Every step felt like an erasure of his dignity, an insult layered upon years of sacrifice and discipline. Neighbors stood frozen at their windows, some with phones in hand, recording, but no one intervened. The silence screamed louder than any word. He was alone, surrounded, branded guilty without a shred of evidence. One of the men shoved a forged document in his face, shouting about arrears and legal action. He could see the flaws in their paperwork, the sloppy seals, the inconsistent lettering. It was a sham. But he also knew truth didn't always matter in moments like this. Perception did. And the perception they wanted was clear. A black man, subdued, powerless, paraded in his own neighborhood. But he wasn't powerless. With a sudden, controlled movement, he planted his feet, breaking free from their grip. The men staggered back, stunned at his strength and composure. He didn't lash out recklessly. Every motion was measured, disciplined, the kind of precision that only comes from years of elite training. His eyes locked on theirs, unflinching, and for the first time, they hesitated. The air grew heavy, the standoff electric with possibility. He knew one wrong move could escalate everything beyond repair. Yet, he also knew submission would hand them the victory they came for. In that suspended moment, between resistance and surrender, between injustice and survival, the world seemed to hold its breath. And as he stood tall against their manufactured authority, one truth became impossible to ignore. They had picked the wrong man to target. The men stumbled back, their confidence shaken, their performance unraveling under the weight of his quiet defiance. The neighborhood, once silent, began to stir. Phones recorded every second, capturing the fraud, the intimidation, the injustice. The fake badges and forged paperwork no longer looked convincing under the glare of truth. Within minutes, they retreated, driven not by conscience but by exposure. Their plan had failed. He stood alone in the driveway, his groceries still scattered across the ground. To an outsider, it might have looked like a victory. He hadn't been taken away. He hadn't been silenced. But inside, the weight of the moment pressed heavy. This wasn't just about him. It was about what it meant to exist in a world where even in your own neighborhood, with your dues paid and your life in order, you could still be targeted, still be diminished, still be made to justify your very presence. The sting wasn't in the confrontation itself. It was in the silence of those who watched. The neighbors who whispered but did not speak. The cameras that recorded but did not intervene. Their inaction was as sharp as the men's aggression. A reminder that racism thrives not only in the boldness of the oppressors, but in the quiet compliance of the bystanders. He walked back into his home, groceries in hand, but he carried something far heavier. The truth that his service, his discipline, his humanity could never shield him from the prejudice written into the fabric of society. And he knew his story was not unique. The question lingers. How many more times will this happen before silence breaks? Before action replaces observation? Before justice becomes more than just a hope,